What's up? What's up? We're back to get into it again a little bit. We are going to jump right back into the whole bullet versus microphone debate. I've got more video loaded up from that John Bray, the one that has made that scenario or theory pretty popular on X, and is actually he's the only one, I believe, to me anyway, that's broken it down to the point to make it believable. But I feel like it is extremely believable. So let's jump right into that. This is John Bray being interviewed by Trigger Smart. If you don't know Trigger Smart, go check him out for sure. Make sure you're subscribed to his channel. He always puts out some good stuff. He's one of my favorites. So let me get this going here, and we'll talk about it some.
All right, let's go ahead and bring our guest on. Welcome, John. Did you want to introduce yourself?
I'm John Bray, John Aaron Bray on X.
And Mr. John is extremely smart, but not really a public speaker. So you just got to kind of overlook his mannerisms and stuff. It's just not being super comfortable behind the microphone. But trust me, it doesn't take anything away from what he's got to say. Super, super smart.
And John has been very in-depth covering the microphone theory, and he has a lot of data to back it up. He has some visuals, and it's basically been his day one theory. Did you want to tell us kind of like how you got into, like what made you kind of go this route? Not super in detail, but just kind of like a high level.
Well, immediately I saw the video and I thought it was AI because it just looks so strange to me. And then my background's in body armor. I developed the refurbishing program for the Army for their IOTVs, OTVs. So I saw how his shirt deformed, and I was certain that he had body armor on. But within the end of the day, it was pretty obvious they didn't. So I started to basically run analysis on it, and that led me to the microphone. The only other thing that could really convince me is that he was shot in the chest. That's the from the physical evidence and the energetic kind of dispersion. That's the only thing that could make any sense to me.
And like I was saying before, like I was saying yesterday, what makes sense to me anyway, what I believe and what others believe, was the idea was for this thing to go off, not hit him in the neck, only in the chest, and with it being underneath the shirt like that, it would have literally appeared to be a gunshot in the chest. Maybe it would have come through the back, maybe it wouldn't have, but it really wouldn't be that unbelievable for even a 30-06 to possibly stop, in a human, midsection, whatever. That's at least somewhat believable. So it wouldn't have had to come out even with no exit wound. If that thing had went off, he'd have hit the ground. They jerked him up, carried him to the car, probably some blood on the shirt. People would have assumed that was a gunshot to the chest, and it just would not have been hard to sell. I think a piece of stray shrapnel is what got him in the neck. And I think they all had oh shit moments when that happened and thought, what have we done? And all of a sudden they had to pivot, and just wasn't a good, it hasn't been a good situation since. Nobody believes with them. Nobody believes them.
What about some people talking about a round coming in and hitting his necklace and bouncing up?
I just find that really unlikely. It's just the other objects.
Absolutely not. That necklace, I don't care how big of a charm's hanging on it. It doesn't have enough resistance for a bullet traveling almost 3,000 feet per second with 3,000 pounds of muzzle or energy. It doesn't put up enough resistance to deflect that bullet. That to me was always silly.
are involved in the movement. It just doesn't, the energy doesn't align to that sort of scenario. The whole reason I started to do the whole vector map pixel flow was to try to pinpoint where the bullet may hit him in his bulletproof vest. But in the middle of kind of creating the code to run that, it became obvious that he didn't have a vest on. The pictures with, you could see his nipples, and then it was just, the back line of where he's hunched over in his seat. There's no way even a executive vest could be concealed to that point. So then that left me just to run the code as I had it, and I immediately noticed that there was kind of a epicenter in the center upper sternum of his shirt, and that led me to kind of start to question the three main kind of energetic centers of the event, which is the shirt that pulled up to his face, basically almost to his cheek, the magnetic clasp that moved across his neck, and what I first thought was a lanyard wire to like an earpiece flying over his head. But it wasn't even a day into the event that someone pointed out that he didn't have an earpiece on. That became pretty obvious. And then better quality.
And again, what he was saying about the epicenter and it being under the shirt. I think I showed a short clip of it last time. It's hard to show those clips on YouTube because, well, it'll get you some strikes. But X is the best place to go look at these type things. John Bray's X page, obviously. Blake Bednar's. There's some others, but those are two of the main ones. If you get on there, there's so many video clips they've got on there. Some of them really, really slow motion. If you watch that event start to finish, the first thing you see move is his shirt over in the area where that microphone was at. If you really watch that, it does that first. And the shirt is literally starting to relax when the wound appears. And there's just no way for that to happen if it was a bullet, because the bullet would have had to cause all the other stuff, to cause the shirt to move, to cause the necklace to break and fly off, to cause what people are calling, I guess, in what looks like cavitation, but what people are calling cavitation. All of that would have been a direct result of the bullet contacting his body. So how can you have all these movements? How can you have all these movements before the wound appears? It's 100%. It cannot be. The story they are telling cannot be.
Video became available, and it was pretty obvious that it was his necklace that flew up and over his head, and it wasn't, a wire. So then I was left with three different things that kind of I had to figure out to explain how they were obviously tied together, because they started movement at the same time, and they kind of moved in kind of opposite directions of each other. The shirt, pulling up on his face, and the magnetic clasp kind of moved opposite of each other at first, and then the magnetic clasp flows back across his chest as the shirt relaxes. And then the necklace was what puzzled me the most, because it's the most energetic object of the event. It moved the quickest. It had the most amount of energy kind of displaced in it, and it was enough energy to actually break the necklace. So then I refined the code to really hone in on those details. And my first runs, the red dots are mapping the epicenter frame to frame. So every frame there's pixel movement, and wherever there was the most pixel movement in the frame, it maps it with a red dot. When there's a lot of movement going on, it can be random. But when you have a lot of quick movement, it's pretty accurate, especially when you have multiple angles. So between the two front angles that we had, I was able to basically pinpoint the epicenters around his sternum. And then I noticed that the magnetic clasp kind of followed that. So that led me to kind of investigate what the magnetic clasp was all about. And then I found the model of the microphone, and then the pictures of them kind of mounting it on it. So then I started studying in the past, how did he wear the microphone? And when he first got the mic, he wore it on the outside of his shirt. And then it slowly kind of evolved, and then they put it underneath the shirt. And that day, it's kind of like mounted in a particular way that it's almost like standing on its side, where it's kind of bulges his shirt out. It looks kind of uncomfortable, and it's at a 45-degree angle. And I kept getting peak maps right below that, like kind of 45 degrees, like a trajectory that matches what you would expect if the bottom of that microphone kind of blew out. So then I found a video of someone actually disassembling the mic, and then I saw where the battery was, and the battery was right in that area. So that led me to start investigate, like, what could this battery be modified somehow? And then it wasn't even a year ago before that event that the Grim Grim Beeper attacks, the Mossad pager attacks happened. And I studied those, and I realized that,
Before you get too deep in the pager thing, That's a really, really, this is a really, really important point. This is a big hang up for a lot of people. The first thing when you mention a microphone exploding, the first thing most people say is, well, wouldn't you see this thing explode in a million pieces? That there's a, for every action, there's a equal, there's an equal opposite amount of reaction. I just screwed that all up. Anyway, so, and that was kind of my thought at first, but you got to understand how this microphone is made. So you have the microphone, and then you've got the back of the microphone, and then on that is another plate, which is magnetic. And then on the outside of that, and maybe it's not, maybe it's metal, one of the two. I can't remember if the outside piece is magnetic or if the piece made onto the microphone is magnetic. But either way, you've got the back of the microphone, and then you've got another plate. And then you would have the shirt, and then you would have another plate on it. So especially with this being a shape charge, and with it being a shape charge, means that it's going to direct its energy towards the body. When that thing goes off, yes, there will obviously be a reaction, and it will push the thing back. But most of its force is going forward, and that's exactly what they're designed to do. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole thing's going to blow up in a million pieces. It's not the way it's, that cone that it's put into is meant to somewhat protect the whatever housing it's in. That being said, most people say, well, why wasn't there a flame and a hole and charring in the shirt and all that stuff? What kept the class from getting blown 500 feet away? But if you picture that thing, when it went off, it forced that microphone away from his body. But there was nothing, no force, no anything in between the two plates that were clasped to his shirt. If you think about that microphone being blown back away from his body, what would cause the little magnetic plate on the outside to fly off? Even if that whole entire microphone got disintegrated, the two metal pieces, the metal and the magnet, should stay stuck to his shirt anyway. And that also would help protect the shirt. So when this thing goes off, and I feel like that's the reason why there wasn't a big, noticeable burn mark or anything like that. When this thing went off, it directed its energy towards the body. Obviously, the microphone would be forced back away from his body, and it would come back as far as that shirt would allow it to go. And you can see that shirt puff way out, that it would go as far as that shirt would allow it to go. But the back of the microphone, the metal plate, and all would have protected the shirt from any kind of blast or anything. So I think that seemed like the obvious thing to me when I first heard about an exploding microphone. I was like, no, there's no way. It would have blew a hole in the shirt. You'd have seen fire, and it would have. But no, if you really think about the way that thing goes together, how it works, it makes perfect sense that that thing would still be stuck to his shirt. And it makes perfect sense that there wouldn't have been a hole burn in his shirt. Now there are different style, clips, ways of holding them onto your shirt. some regular clip-on style, yes. Now, if there was something like that, some kind of charge inside them, I could see them coming off because yes, the explosion would destroy them. But on that style microphone, you literally have two metal pieces, a magnet and a metal plate stuck together with the shirt in between.
Those pagers were in circulation for over a decade before they were detonated, and the batteries went through airport scanners. They were completely functional that whole time.
That's the key. Completely functional.
Yeah, that really opened my mind to the fact that Charlie's microphone was the older model. He had those microphones for quite a while, and he's traveled all over. So there's ample opportunity for someone to get a hold of it, and you can see how quickly you can get the battery out of it. You don't need to solder anything. You can just pop it out and basically replace it with a loaded battery, and the user would never know. You could go on using it. It would have approximately 75% of the charge capacity, and it would take someone that used it all the way to empty all the time to even notice that it changed. So that made it plausible.
Well, what happened? I don't know. Am I still alive, guys?
You can get the battery out of it. You don't need to solder anything. You can just pop it out and basically replace it with a loaded battery, and the user would never know. You could go on using it. It would have approximately 75% of the charge capacity, and it would take someone that used it all the way to empty all the time to even notice that it changed. So that made it plausible. And then I started to study the injuries from the.
I apologize about that. I really have no idea what that was. I've got my computer plugged in directly, so I don't know.
Pager attacks, which the pagers themselves were alkaline batteries. They were round, like AA style batteries. So they left like black residue, but they didn't leave any burns, and they didn't really like char the victims, and it was pretty directional.
Wait, so you're saying the ones in Lebanon did not leave charring?
Yeah, what they left was the alkaline battery was like the insides of the alkaline battery, like the black residue from the alkaline battery. The walkie-talkies that followed the day after, they had lithium batteries, and they didn't leave any charring or any residue. They were pretty much clean. So that's why I was like, well, that's bizarre, because immediately, like everyone else, you think explosion, you think it's going to be like a lot of radial damage. There'll be charring and residue left. So that opened up to the possibility that it could be a completely clean burn. But then I was kind of perplexed, like why would someone go through the effort of this and not have a means to cover it up, right? If they killed Charlie with a loaded microphone bomb, everyone would know who it is. So that kind of opened up the idea that they would need a patsy. And then the rifle kind of made sense to me, like the weirdness and strangeness about it. But I'll put my mind in kind of the conspirators, right? If I wanted to pull this sort of event off.
And what better way to do that than find some gullible, 21-year-old kid that likes to hang out in Discord and get video games all the time, radicalize him, and then maybe even literally make him think that he is going to do a deed, and that that deed is justified and would be a good deed. Say, hey man, do you have a gun? Yeah, I got a gun. All right, well, bring your gun and, blah, 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 and be here and take care of it. Dude shows up with his gun, makes his way up on the roof, takes his screwdriver and puts the scope back on it, gets down on his hands and knees and lays out prone, looks through the scope, and bam, he hears what he thinks a gunshot and says, "Oh shit," and jumps up and haul his ass up out of there. I mean, that is one possibility. But at the end of the day, the whole 30-06 was just what the boy happened to have. And the charging documents, that they claim that they have direct DNA evidence that Tyler Robinson is the guy, because they have a gun with his DNA. They got a bullet casing with his DNA. They got a screwdriver. They got a towel with his DNA. But none of those things literally in any way proves that he used it. It doesn't even prove he pointed that thing at Charlie Kirk. All it proves is that Tyler Robinson's gun, screwdriver, bullet casing, and towel was at the crime scene. That's all that means. Now, maybe eventually, and I seriously doubt it, maybe eventually we'll get we'll get get the rifling and stuff like that. Maybe possibly they'll be able to trace that bullet. But they'll have to prove that a bullet fired from that gun matches a bullet that was dug out of Charlie Kirk. And I can guarantee you, not guarantee you, but damn near guarantee you that they didn't pull a bullet out of Charlie Kirk to compare. So at the end of the day, they may have DNA on this stuff, but they do not have what it takes to tie him to a murder. That's not DNA proof that he murdered Charlie. That's DNA proof that his shit ended up at that crime scene or in the general vicinity.
I would want the wound and the event to look like a rifle shot. And in my mind, immediately what I thought was it looked like a chest shot. So then I was like, what if this was designed to mimic a chest shot of a 30-06?
So let's talk about that really quick, because a lot of people are going to say, like, what's your official explanation as to why the official narrative wouldn't work?
Well, it's because it's the order of events. So you when you watch the events unfold in slow motion, frame by frame, the necklace, the microphone movement, and the shirt all precede the appearance of the neck wound. And with a high velocity impact to the neck, the zone 2 of the neck in particular, you would have instantaneous effects, right? You would have atomized blood, you would have cavitation. There's no way that you would have, it's at 0.43 seconds delay from when the shirt first moves to when you see the neck wound even appear. And
that means there's just right at a half a second in between the shirt starting to move and when a neck wound appears. And that is completely 100% right ass backwards. For it to have been a gunshot, that wound would have to precede anything else.
It's almost a whole second before blood appears out of the neck wound.
Yeah, that's the strangest part to me, is that delay.
So then I studied, the forensics of high velocity impacts, and there's so much, case studies on it and examples of people being shot in the neck in the exact same area, and nothing about it made sense. There's no high velocity blood, no blood atomization, and then the strangeness of the leaked autopsy reports, like them trying to say that the C1 was hit when the trajectory was almost impossible for that to happen, and then like it traveled down to the C6, and I just couldn't understand why they would go through efforts to try to explain that. But when I got to kind of the aftermath, right? So once I thought I had a solid grasp on what caused the shirt to move, what caused the necklace to move, what caused his body to react in the way it did, the way his hands grasp together, his elbows lift up, and his arms come in, and particularly his legs. If you look at his legs, his knees immediately come together, and he lifts himself out of the chair. And so that's indicating that he had mid-brain and brainstem damage. And then that made perfect sense to me. That's why they...
How would that happen, you might ask? And I don't remember just how much detail he goes into this right here. But basically, theory is the thing explodes. Something out of that microphone. He is strongly leaning towards the battery just because of the size, dimensions, and all that. Very well could be the battery, but regardless, when it goes, something in that microphone comes loose, catches him in the neck, doesn't go deep enough to get, like the carotid and get an arterial bleed. Just a venous bleed. Like that's why it's so dark. It's literally just draining out of his head. But with an explosion like this, or with something like this, if that was a shape charge, when it went off, it would be directing an immense amount of energy out of the end of it. And that is why it's a shape charge. That's what it's intended to do. Instead of that energy just being radial and literally just, spreading out from in every direction, with it being shaped like that, it makes it move much faster and have much more pressure out of it in the direction that it's designed to go. Well, with that thing turning, I think I showed a picture of that yesterday. With that thing turning up on its side like it did, it would have been aiming towards his neck. Theory is, when it went off, instead of all the energy being directed into his chest, it sent a shock wave into his chest, obviously, but also up because of the angle that it was going at. It threw that piece of shrapnel, whether it's a battery or what, threw it up. And so the idea is that shock wave went through into his body and traveled all the way up and damaged his brain and spinal cord. And to me, even though that might sound a little crazy, it's still more plausible than a 30-06 coming in at a particular angle and then going up and then making a U-turn and going down. Because the symptoms that he had with his hands drawing up, with his legs drawing up, that whole, for that to happen, that is like literally a brain stem damage. That's really all that can cause that. So if this bullet hits him lower neck to damage that brain stem, it's going to have to go up. But then the story is that it settled down around C6, down lower. Then it fragmented, and part of it ended up in his heart. I mean, like, it's just a ridiculous. That is harder to believe than there was a shape charge in there, and it was literally just that shockwave. If you watch slow motion videos also, you can literally see his hair standing up when that thing goes off. Again, that shockwave was coming up and it literally stood his hair up. I don't think, no matter how that 30-06 bullet hit him in the neck, that it would make his hair stand up. Oh, I figured I'd add that in there. Let's see how far he goes with the explanation here.
Have to lean on the C1 damage, because that's the only way that you could have that sort of physical reaction from a ballistic impact. Outside of a headshot, it would have to be at the very base of the spine for a bullet to cause a physical reaction like that. So, it made me think that possibly the narrative was being crafted kind of on the fly. And so then I started questioning the neck wound, like the bleeding of the neck wound, the delayed bleeding of it, and the shape of it. And particularly the trajectory of the magnetic clasp, which basically tells you the trajectory of the whole microphone, right? They were connected together, and how they lined up perfectly with where the wound appeared. And then the wound had this strange, rectangular appearance and the delayed bleeding. And if you look very closely, frame by frame, you can actually see the deformation of the flesh. It matches the trajectory of the microphone, the direction it was traveling. So
a quick question that people are going to have is, are you saying that the microphone itself exploded, or are you saying that something exploded out of the microphone towards his neck?
I believe that the microphone was designed to replicate a 30-06 impact to the chest. And there was unforeseen shrapnel that came off of the microphone, either the battery or the magnetic clasp, that struck his neck, that they didn't prepare for. And so when
and at this point, he did not realize this. I know he made an X post later after he did this interview. He didn't realize that the magnetic clasp did stay with the shirt. It never was thrown off of there. And as I was explaining about how the two are sandwiched together on the shirt, that explosion wouldn't have caused that to fly off. He goes through all that on his X page. But because it is kind of hard to see that clasp, but it's because it's at such an angle, the straight on pictures just don't catch it. But it was definitely not the magnetic clasp, and he acknowledges that on his on X after he does this interview. But yeah, he acknowledges that the clasp, the magnet, never actually came off of his shirt.
Obvious neck wound became kind of the center point of the event. They had to shift the narrative from a chest shot to a single neck shot, and they had to explain the physical reactions that we all saw by the C1 impact and the.
And I want to also say, I've searched high and low. I've not been able to find any pictures, but there were several people there that were talking about him having some type of chest wound. I mean, he didn't lay there long enough, and once they actually got him on the ground, he had 6 guys bent over the top of him. So it's not that it would have been super noticeable anyway, but there were several people that talked about how it looked like he did have a chest wound. His chest was caved in, that type of thing. So it definitely wasn't all to the neck. And I think that's one thing that freaked them out so much, and one reason why it complicated their narrative so much, because the story was built around a single 30-06 shot to the chest. All of a sudden, he ends up with the chest hole, chest injury, and a neck injury. And like I said, I think they all had a oh shit moment.
The vertebrae damage, when in reality, I believe he probably had chest damage too. And if you remember, there was leaks from the hospital that described massive chest damage. It said his chest was caved in. And even.
Yes, and that is true. There was a leak from the hospital that was talking about him having chest damage. And funny thing here, I don't know if any of y'all remember this. Candace was the first one to report on it, but I have had other people. I've heard other people do it since. The FBI went around and seized all the video footage from the hospital. Now, what would be the point in that? Oh, maybe the cameras would show him with a huge chest wound and a neck wound. So there again, they would have to explain, well, there was one gunshot, one bullet. How did it hit him in the chest and in the neck? There's no way to explain that.
Some of the first reports of the autopsy, which the New York Times article even mentioned chest, but then it was redacted and it's changed later, and you can't find any mention of that again. But even the first witness that I saw from the crowd said that he was shot in the chest and blood came out from underneath his shirt. Yeah. So I feel like that there was a scramble to cover up any chest wound because they only had a single rifle shot, and you can't have 2 different wounds with a single rifle shot. And I think that explains the strangeness at the hospital with the physicians and the surgeon not be able to go back in, and then autopsies ordered overnight, and then flying him out, and then the security footage from the hospital getting confiscated. It all just seemed kind of out of the ordinary and unnecessary, unless you had something to hide, like a very obvious chest wound, right?
So just real quick, sorry to cut you off there. Some people are saying that he sounds nervous. Yeah, this is not what he does. He does not do podcasts. He does not do interviews regularly. So we're going to
see, that's what I was saying,
to be giving him some grace because he is not doing this on a regular basis. So,
and I would say that for anyone to hop on a live stream and completely, flesh out their entire, very complicated theory of, amongst all these people online is a nerve-wracking thing. So John, I think you're knocking it out of the park. You're doing a great job.
All right. So now some people are asking to have you explain this. So, and actually you said that you either wrote software or you use software for this. So who, I guess you want to walk people about, like, through the software piece of it, like how you came up with this kind of grid that shows where the pressure and the power and energy was?
Yeah. So I took the MIT Labs optical flow software, and I modified it to specifically look for epicenters frame to frame. So what it's doing is looking frame to frame to video and looking on how the pixels move. it's because his shirt has those freedom text across it, and his shirt's white, and then we have the black magnetic clasp on the shirt. It gives us a lot of vectors to track. So basically, the software is looking at every frame, and it's mapping the movement in between those frames, and then it's putting a red circle on the epicenter of those movements. And you can see the color mapping is showing you where the areas of the highest movement. So it kind of shows you the previous frame where the movement moved from the previous frame to the next
Like an
frame.
onion skin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so like in this one, is the red circle where the focus is, or is that just
The red circle is where the peak movement happened from the previous frame to that frame. And you can see
movement across.
And you see the heat frame from where the text was. It's showing you the text was in the previous frame. It was there, and then you can see where the text on his shirt is now, where the shirt pulls up across his face.
Yep.
Okay, so quick question on this. So this is a separate theory that I'll probably ask you about. But the electrocution theory, he was saying that he was trying to explain like the burn under his like chest nipple area. But in your stuff you're showing here, it's not that low, correct? It's higher up on his chest.
Yeah, and the other angle maps it slightly different. Because the pixels are going to be different from different angles. But they're both in that general area.
Okay, so they're both kind of by the F of freedom.
Yeah, exactly. The shape charge theory basically is that it's not like a general basic explosive. It's not a radial force. It has a small charge and a cone, and it basically directs a high energy jet out of the cone. So it's made to penetrate armor, but you can use it on soft targets too, and it allows you to create a wound that's very similar to a rifle wound, where it leaves a deep wound channel, and it'll even leave copper fragmentation into the wound. So what we're seeing in the shirt movement is the overpressurization. So the pressure that didn't penetrate.
And the reason it would leave that copper in the wound is because generally at least those small shape charges, that cone is built out of copper. So just another thing that kind of leads toward the all appearances of a bullet wound. Oh, that bullet fragmented to nothing. We're finding little bits and pieces of copper and some copper residue in here. So we know a bullet went through there. Had to have been a bullet. Not necessarily, but you see how that kind of helps that argument.
The flesh basically is escaping through the shirt, and that's what causes the shirt to balloon up and move so much. The shirt that pulls up across his face on the opposite side of the microphone is actually from his necklace. The pendant on his necklace, the cross pendant, is pushed down, and then it can't go down anymore. So then it follows the path of the necklace and raises up across, and that's what lifts his shirt up across his face.
Okay, so you're saying the downward pressure of the explosion puts pressure down on the pendant, that stretches the necklace, that force builds up, and then it pops back up, and that's why you see it kind of goes vertically, like straight up in the air.
Yeah. If you can actually see one frame where the cross is peeking out next to his face, but it gets caught and the necklace breaks, so then the necklace slides out of the cross pendant, and the cross pendant falls back down, and that's why his shirt falls back down so quickly. And then immediately after that, you'll see the appearance of the wound on his neck.
Okay, so for this,
you see that part, the magnetic clasp goes on the backside. So that part that we're seeing right now, that he has a suction cup, is against Charlie's chest. And that's the batteries against his chest also. So if the shape charge was put anywhere, it's going to be put in that gold battery right there.
No, I think with the previous pager attacks and the cell phones, they just replaced a portion of the battery, correct?
Right. They basically took 20% of the cell and replaced it with the explosive.
Okay.
And I believe that's what they probably did with this. They just replaced it with a smaller cell battery, a slightly shorter battery, and then they put the shape charge in the end of the space that was left over.
And that would make it so it would still function. He could still live stream and everything with it, but obviously the battery wouldn't last as long.
Exactly.
Okay, now someone is asking you to explain how the pendant broke one more time, just so they can understand it.
Basically, the pendant, the necklace was moved by the force of the explosion, and then it crossed the path of the shape charge. So when the pendant was pushed down and it met the end of the slack of the necklace, and then it's like a pendulum, it swung up and started to come out of the shirt, and that pulled the necklace across, and it ended up crossing that peak that we see in the middle of his chest, and that's what snapped the necklace. And then the momentum of the necklace forced it over his head. So that's why when we see the necklace fly up and over his head, it's broken. It's a single strand, 26 inches of necklace, instead of being a loop connected.
And we don't know at this point what the coroner's report said. I've seen some people asking about that, and I've tried to kind of interject a little bit too. I mean, that's part of the problem, you guys, is that we don't know exactly, what the coroner had to say, what the autopsy said, what the doctors, officially said. I mean, we're going off of third, fourth, fifth party information.
And if you're also taking into consideration things like, now Candace is saying that, Colvett never said what he said, or that what he said was made up, and that
That's exactly why we're all doing what we're doing also. Because instead of taking this third, fourth, fifth party information and just running with it and taking it as the God's gospel truth, we're actually looking with our own eyes at what happened that day and breaking it down. Day by day, week by week, like this goes on and on and on. But what else are we supposed to do? Because we're not getting the real story from the authorities. I can promise you that. Like I said a few streams ago, I think that they were really hoping on another JFK type deal. But difference is, back when when JFK was murdered, there was no internet. The internet obviously has been terrible in a lot of ways, but now it really, really, really is useful in ways too. Just definitely the age of information.
Surgeon never said that. We're kind of getting to the point where can we believe anything that's been told so far? Anything. Yeah. So like the fact that he had broken vertebrae, you know, and like, is that true? We don't even know if, like, because if people are trying to make these other narratives fit that now, like, well, if he's electrocuted, how do you account for the vertebrae? Do we even know the vertebrae are broken?
And so why the speculation? Because I think inquiring minds want to know. And there are a lot of us who just cannot stand to sit around and wait for, you know, a year plus. And it just doesn't feel right. That's, at least I'll speak for myself in saying that I can't just sit around and twiddle my thumbs and wait. I've got to keep digging.
So the next movement, I guess. So say it explodes, it sends that the magnet in the mic start to go the direction.
Just going to break in real quick here. One thing about the lady there on the bottom, her name's Kelly Raybon. You can get on YouTube, check out her stuff. I mean, she's definitely interesting, but just throwing this out there. Yeah, she believes Charlie Kirk's alive, and I can't. I can go with the alternate theories of how he died, but I don't believe he's still alive. I don't believe he faked his death, but just throwing that out there, just so you know, in case she makes a comment or something and you're like, huh? So yeah, she's on the whole Charlie Kirk still with us.
Direction of the, I guess the shape charge would knock it that way.
So a shape charge has to have a standoff. It has to create a jet before it can penetrate. It's not penetrating with brute force. It's actually, creating a high-speed jet that's basically turning anything it contacts into liquid. So it needs a 2 centimeter standoff. So they would have to design a primer charge that kind of forces the microphone away from his flesh before the shape charge goes off. And if you look at the particularly Cubs video, the highest resolution video that's kind of to Charlie's right or left-hand side, you can see that the microphone lifts up and kind of almost touches his face before it starts to make the trajectory across his body. And it's my belief that that's the primer charge creating the standoff space. And that primer charge is what causes the necklace to move. And then once the primary charge, the shape charge goes off, it actually snaps the necklace. And that's when you see it break loose and fly over his head. And that's when the trajectory of the microphones change from just kind of lifting up to his face to going across his body. And at that same time, we have the shirt coming down. So while we have the microphone going, the magnet clasp and the microphone going across his chest, we have the shirt falling down. And they kind of like at a certain point cross each other. And you kind of lose sight of the magnetic clasp. And then that's when the wound on his neck appears. So if you look at it frame to frame, there's no single frame where you can see both at the same time. You see the magnetic clasp, and then you don't see it, and then you see a wound on his neck. And I'm not 100% certain that it is the magnetic clasp. It could be the magnetic clasp or the battery. They're very similar shape, as you saw in the video before. They're both rectangular. But I am sure the trajectory of the microphone and the trajectory matches perfectly with the appearance of the wound, and the microphone kind of snaps back. And you can just see kind of a bulge where it is, but you don't necessarily ever see the full magnetic clasp again. So it's the timing and the trajectory is what led me to believe that it was a blunt rectangular object from the microphone that causes the neck wound, combined with actual physical traits of the wound itself. It's not a high velocity wound. That was a medium velocity wound, and you know that because of the delayed bleeding, and then also the deformation of the skin. It was just the skin was flexed outwards. It wasn't like a cavitation from a high energy impact. And then the bleeding was so strange and delayed. And we can't show it here, but I actually have code that has mapped the fluid dynamics of the blood, and I've been able to actually track.
And see, that's always been to me, that's always been a misunderstanding. And trust me, I thought that was what was going on when I first started seeing this stuff myself. But if you watch those slow motion, if you watch them slowed down, you can see his neck literally flare out. It looks like it goes all kinds of different directions. But if you actually look, it appears that it goes out and then back. But regardless, everybody assumed that when his neck started swelling out, that was cavitation, what you normally expect from a bullet wound. When that bullet enters the body and it starts dumping all of its energy, all that energy has to go somewhere. So, it causes cavitation, and it causes that quick swelling inside. The pressure from that energy dump forces everything out. But in this case, it would be the shock wave coming off of that shape charge when it goes off. Again, that shock wave pushes his neck out, pushes his hair straight up, and the shock wave is strong enough that it literally breaks his neck all the way up to the brain stem.
The rectangular object falling out of his neck from 2 different angles. So
Okay.
not only do we have the trajectory matching,
And that is true. Obviously, I can't show that on YouTube. Go to John Bray's X. But if you watch that in slow motion, he's got a few videos where he literally points that object out. But after that wound appears, you keep it in slow motion, you watch a rectangular piece does fall down. It looks like it falls right out of that wound. As soon as it falls out, then all of a sudden that blood gushes out.
the portion where the wound appears, but also have a rectangular object, flat black object falling out of the wound from 2 different angles. Also, either the magnetic clasp or the battery. It was something dense and rectangular.
Okay, so you don't think it was like shrapnel from the mic exploding?
And it would be the battery because, as he conceded later, and it's been confirmed, I've confirmed it several times. When everything comes to rest, they get him down on the ground. The magnetic clasp is still attached to his shirt. So it absolutely was not the magnetic clasp that hit him in the neck and then fell back out.
That's what I mean. It's shrapnel from it, but the shrapnel was the dense object being the magnetic clasp or the battery itself.
Unintentional.
A lot of people are asking, like, how can the mic and the mic magnet go towards like anywhere? Shouldn't it just explode away from the body?
It's because it's a shaped charge. Imagine it's like a jet. So it's not explosive where it's a radial explosive where it's exploding in all directions. This is an explosion that has a directed path. And
So
the only expansion comes out of that directed path, the cone. So it's like, like a rocket engine. When you launch a rocket engine, it just doesn't explode everywhere. It's in a directed path in one direction, and that causes a trajectory, and it follows that trajectory quickly.
So that would mean in this case, equal and opposite reaction. That would mean that the shape charge would have had to have been pointed down and away from him, correct? To push everything up towards him?
Right. And so the variable comes in is the primer charge, where they have to create the standoff space. So combined with the odd angle that the microphone was kind of mounted on him, it wasn't mounted flat against his body. It was kind of like stood on its side. And then the standoff charge, which it's my belief that they anticipated the mic to be flat on his body. And the standoff charge was made to raise the microphone directly away from his body before the primary shape charge went off. But because the microphone was kind of mounted on its side, when the standoff charge went off, it lifted it up. So then it changed the trajectory. When the shape charge went off, it basically created like a rocket engine that caused it to travel across his chest instead of it directing the charge directly into his chest. And a shape charge is 90% efficient, more than 90% efficient of directing the energy to one direction. So the whole equal and opposite, it doesn't really apply because we're sending less than a gram of metal cone in a high-speed jet into the flesh. So it's not like a bullet or a traditional ballistic where you're sending a heavy object in the opposite direction.
How would this microphone explode with enough force to kill someone? So do you think that this has enough charge to cause all the reaction that we saw in that small of a package?
It's because it's concentrating. It's like a water jet where you're basically taking all that energy in that charge and you're directing it to a very small stream. And because you're creating an acceleration because you're forcing this expansive force down a very small cone, it reaches Mach 7. So anything it contacts, it basically turns it to liquid. And so it's deep penetrating. That's why they use it for, to defeat tank armor and things like that. But with soft tissue, it's even more devastating because there's not as much resistance. So it would create a deep channel just like a 30-06 impact, but it would do it with a minimum amount of charge, less than 2 grams.
So this is one of the pagers from Lebanon.
Yeah,
And
that in particular is the walkie-talkie.
walkie-talkie. Okay. So now
And these, I'm confident, were not shape charges. I think these just had a high explosive in them. I don't think they were worried about mimicking a gunshot. They just wanted to blow those people the fuck up. So that's what they did. So proof that this can be done. It can be done and it not be detected. It can be done and the thing still function perfectly. But I think in Charlie's case, it would have been a shape charge, whereas this was just a standard type charge.
bringing this up because with the Candace Owens kind of dropped that bomb in one of her videos saying that there's a little specks, the little black specks on the floor inside of her car. Have you seen that yet?
Yeah.
So the car that Charlie was in, and they're saying that that might be from, people are implying that might be from the explosion, like pieces of the pager, or in this case of the audio, that exploded, and these little tiny pieces they're seeing in the car were from that. What do you think about that?
I believe.
Yeah, I'm actually the one that sent her the message about that. The type of plastic that you see in the floorboard too, or would match the plastic you could expect from that device. So you have flat black plastic, and then you have glossy plastic. The glossy plastic is the actual face of the case, which the battery is right behind that O there. So that immediate charge would basically shatter that into a million little pieces like glass, and then the primary charge would further break the inner core of the device, which you showed earlier when the battery was kind of popped out of the device. It's all flat black on the inside of it. And how thin that plastic is, when it would break, it would just shatter into small little pieces like that from the high pressure wave of the explosive. Like I said, it's a Mach 7 jet that's going to be coming out of that device. It's just going to completely wreck anything. And it's not a hot explosion. It can reach 500 degrees, but it does so in such a quick time that it doesn't really get time to transfer away. That's why it doesn't like burn things or leave burns even on the victim. It would leave a wound that looked a lot like a rifle impact.
So it's a quick release of energy, not a hot explosion.
Yeah, the quickness of it is the real key factor. It's an extremely quick burning and clean burning explosive. And that kind of explains the high energy that we see, how fast it dissipates, from the shirt. It causes a huge reaction, but then it goes away really fast.
And just real quick, just to get this out of the way, do you think that there's any chance Charlie's still alive?
If he's still alive, he's the greatest actor that's ever lived. I mean, he nailed the physical reaction of the midbrain and brainstem damage, and the way he hit the ground. I have videos of him hitting the ground slow motion. It was devastating. I mean, his head bounced off the ground. He was absolutely limp. I'm a firm believer that his heart was almost stopped before he even hit the ground.
Well, and I know that Charles McClintock says he has an image where his neck is destroyed, based on the way his head's hanging. So that, I know a lot of people want hope that he's still alive, but I'm not sure if anyone can guarantee that. People asking, could the necklace have had something in it, like PET or something in the necklace itself? Yeah,
I've actually thought about that. The cross, the pendant itself, possibly having, but the seeing it peek out of the shirt, still kind of intact, made me kind of leave that. And then it needs an energetic means to, it'd be a lot more difficult to place an explosive independent of a cross and have a means to trigger it than it would be in the microphone. The microphone is just the most convenient thing to target with explosives, because you have all the electronics, you have the battery, it's going to be on his chest, literally against his chest. It's just really, really convenient. And he doesn't have it most of the time. If his cross he's wearing, all the time, it would just be a lot more difficult to get access to the cross to plant an explosive in it.
Now, this is a very common one. People are asking, well, if an explosion went off under a shirt, how come it didn't tear or mark his shirt? Why is there no explosion marks? Why is there no tears that are obvious? If there was enough force to kill him, then why wouldn't it have left some kind of marking or tearing?
And that's a very, valid question. And it comes down to the use of the shape charge. They're made to be very efficient in directing that energy in one direction. So it's like having, like I said before, a rocket engine where you have a lot of propellant, you have a lot of energy, but there's only one path for it to escape. And that path is through a very directed metal cone. And as that explosion expands, it's slowly releasing out of that metal cone and creating a really high speed jet that penetrates into the flesh. So it's not like a ballistic, launch of a bullet where you have, the force of the bullet, causing an equal and opposite force, or like a traditional explosion where you have a radial force expanding everywhere. It's a very controlled explosion.
All right, now let me ask you this, because of the new images that are coming out supposedly, and Barron's saying that he saw a burn under his nipple on the right side, kind of down by his rib. Could that be explained from the jet, from the shape charge burning that area as it was going off?
I would say it's probably more from the primer charge, where they had to have a primary kind of like a priming explosive to create the space they needed between the device and his flesh for the shape charge to do its work. The shape charge is just going to leave a very small, round, very clean hole. Like the Israeli attacks with the Mossad attacks with the pager, they were designed to send shrapnel to their face with someone holding the device in their hands. So there's not a direct analog, even though they used the same type of explosive hidden in a battery. They weren't designed to explode right on the person's body, or like a shape charge, which would be a few centimeters away from the body. They were designed for someone to push a button, looking at the pager, and send shrapnel at their face, basically. So that's why we see the differences of, from a traditional explosive. It's not something that we're accustomed to seeing. You can look at examples of, armor penetrating shape charges and kind of see how cleanly they make the holes, and how they don't even have to put a backing on it. They just set it on the metal, right? And it makes a big giant hole. And
a lot of people don't realize too that it's used on a much larger scale. They use it in war. Yeah, they use shape charges to blow through tanks and stuff like that. So the technology is just miniature. For this use case. Yeah,
and it's very quiet too. It sounds like a firework. So that's the other thing about the rifle. It's like you wouldn't need a lot of sound to kind of muffle it and make it where people wouldn't notice that there was an explosion, right on his person. It just, any sort of distraction would make it easy for people to overlook it.
So what are your thoughts on the sound itself? So a lot of audio engineers and audio forensics people are saying that there was a cracked thump that was consistent with a high power rifle and all those things. So what are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely think that there was a 30-06 shot that day. I think there was a supersonic crack. All that definitely happened, but I think it was more of a ruse to provide cover for the explosion and also to tie the assassination to the patsy. The area that it happened in is so tricky because there's a corridor, there's concrete walls on both sides, like large flat concrete walls, and then we're dealing with audio from cell phones, which are, they clip. There's a lot of challenges, and the biggest thing I have a problem with is that the rifle sound came through the PA system. If you look at the videos, all the videos that the cameras can see the PA speakers, the rifle sound is so much louder than the videos where the cameras aren't in direct sight of the speakers.
Okay, wait, say that again.
The rifle sound was played through the PA speakers. So okay. the speakers that were playing Charlie's voice and the person that he was taking questions from, the rifle sound was without a doubt played through those speakers. Now whether that,
and he doesn't mean that the speakers were the source of the sound. He just means that when that gunshot went off, it was picked up by a microphone and then played through the speakers. So I don't remember how clear he makes that, but just to be clear, he absolutely thinks a gunshot went off, and I do too. And when that gunshot went off, it was picked up by a microphone and then played through the speakers. Kind of like what happened when Trump was shot at.
Charlie's microphone picked it up or some other means, but you can't deny that the videos that are close to the speakers, their rifle sound is much louder than the videos of where the camera's not in direct sight of the speakers.
So people asking about, what about obviously the electrocution theory and or a taser? Would that explain what you're seeing with the body reaction?
With one hand, but the hand that's not holding, like that picture I showed you where his fingers are almost like crossed and his knees coming together. If you've ever been electrocuted, it affects where the electricity is flowing. So his hand is holding the microphone, which I'm using the exact same mic that Charlie used that day, by the way.
58. Yep.
Yes, sir. It would definitely grasp. He would grasp and hold that microphone from that electricity, but that current would be traveling through his arm, through the chair, down to the ground. And that's the other problem, is that he's sitting on a chair that has a plastic seat, and he's sitting on like a memory foam cushion, and then he's on a platform that has a composite top and an aluminum frame. So like the path of conductivity is not very good either. Can it happen? Absolutely. I was shocked. When I first heard it, I was very dismissive. But when I researched, people get shocked by these microphones all the time. Yep. Because there's three prongs. One prong's a grounding prong. And if it's hooked to a PA system that's not grounded properly, anything that's amplified on that PA system can send that voltage through you. And it takes a lot less voltage to kill you than I ever imagined. So it absolutely is possible. It absolutely could happen. But I don't think his physical reactions necessarily match that. And then there's too many other unexplained things, like what caused the necklace to fly off his head, what caused the shirt to balloon around, what caused the neck wound. It would be like unnecessary addition to an already complicated assassination attempt. If it was done nefariously, and then he's holding the microphone on and off. Like, what would trigger it all of a sudden to start electrocuting them? Usually there's something that causes it, like someone hugs someone that's wet, or they drop it in water, or they pick it up for the first time. Like, there has to be a variable that changes for it to all of a sudden start to electrocute you.
I think some people are saying like nefarious reasons, right? Like someone flipped the switch that took away the ground, right? That's kind of what I think that theory is based on.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely doable. It wouldn't take a lot, but it doesn't explain everything we saw.
Yeah, I agree. So he's on some kind of either carpet or industrial rubber or like tough coat, and those are all designed to be non-conductive. Yeah. But so if you get a chance after this, go check out my video on electrocution, the one where it's the blue thumbnail. But I'm just spent like 50 minutes talking about all the different ways he could have been electrocuted besides the microphone itself. Yeah. But one thing that I want to point out too is you were talking about the way his both hands came up, but it was only in his left hand. And typically, if you're electrocuted, that hand would grip on, the other one would still be free to move, and he'd probably trying to rip it out of his hand and stuff like that. The other thing is, and this was pointed out by Elgeist, but he had his hands down in his lap with both hands on it when it started, right? Yeah. So he would have probably stayed in that position and gotten shocked in both hands and been locked in that position, right?
Absolutely.
So the fact that he let go with one hand and had it in his other hand and was moving and stuff freely, kind of, I don't want to say it like completely debunks it, but it doesn't look good for that theory.
Yeah, it doesn't look like electrocution to me. I would say that from analyzing all the videos, there's definitely been a few videos that I'm very suspect of. The metadata doesn't match. They were made like 10, 12 days after the event, and then they're just so highly compressed. And it's so easy to modify videos nowadays. What I look for is consistency between angles. I know the first few angles that came out so fast after the event that there's very little time for anyone to fake them, and they all happen to be very consistent from frame to frame. You don't see anything unique frame to frame in those videos than you see in any of the other originals. So whenever I see a video that has even a unique frame, I'm always very suspect of it.
Another thing too that Jason Goodman pointed out, I know people have a lot of different feelings about his theory and that kind of stuff, but one thing he was pointing out early on was that there was like 15, I think was it 15 or 10 frame per second videos that were released, which that is not normal frame rate
Yeah.
for any device I've ever seen in my entire life. So obviously it's been manipulated in some kind of way.
Yeah. And if you've ever done any work with like, AI engine, like it wants to do less frames. It'll do whatever it can to cheat. It'll double frames. It'll do, it's very lazy in its processing. And to do 30 frames a second is a lot of work. So if it can cheat a little bit and, do 10 frames, then it will. The sound would be very quiet and very directed. So only the people that were really close to Charlie would even be able to really perceive it. It would be no louder than an M80 firecracker. And I think that's where the key of the rifle shot kind of comes into play too. It put in my mind as, the would-be assassin planning this, the rifle shot not only provides a tie to the patsy, so you can have your fall guy, but it also provides perfect cover for the explosion.
And can you ask, and sorry, we're having to play the telephone game, okay, but can you ask John if he's comfortable? At one point, we had talked a little bit about the timing of the plant explosion that had happened in Tennessee. Can you ask him if he's comfortable talking about that, or if he's thought any more about that?
Okay, Kelly's asking about the plant explosion in Tennessee, and if you're comfortable talking more about that or not.
By the way, that is coming up. I got at least 2 that I'm interviewing, former employees there. So just reminding everybody of that. Stay tuned for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this was just another one of those things that was just, there's a certain amount of coincidences you can overlook, but when things start to get like highly weird, it becomes hard to ignore. So the AES plant in Tennessee, their defense contractor, they were actually contracted to make these micro-shaped charges. They process the same explosive that I propose is in this device. They actually make the very device that I proposed assassinated Charlie. 30 days after the event at UVU, the manufacturing plant that makes those micro-shaped charges explodes into 1 million pieces.
Wait a second. So say that again.
The manufacturing plant that has a government contract to create these very devices that I'm theorized killed Charlie exploded 30 days after the UVU event.
Almost like a cover-up.
Exactly. So, so I looked into the employees. I saw the victim list. 16 employees died that day. God bless them. But in the news report, it said the production manager was brand new to the job. So it made me curious about what happened to the old production manager. When did he leave? And so, I don't want to say the guy box the guy or anything, but he literally left days after the event at the UVU, and he doesn't have a new job. I wasn't able to contact him with any numbers I could find. Like, it's very, very odd. Like, he just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. So it's like you start to get the vibes that something wasn't quite right there. It's suspicious timing, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, all of that combined. That's definitely a good lead to chase, but that's way too coincidental, I think.
The Lebanon explosions were pagers that were made to detonate to people's faces. I'm on 2% battery, so you're about to lose me. I appreciate the both of you having me on. It's been great.
Yeah, and just real quick on that note, if he's running out of time, and we're hitting 2 hours too, so I will, with your battery dying, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it well. The questions were good. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask me on X. I'm very open to dialogue on there. So.
All right, and you can see on the screen, subscribe and follow him, John Bray on X, John Aaron Bray. And of course, hit like on the way out of the stream. We appreciate everyone being here, and we will catch you on the next one.
All right. Well, that was informative. Speaking of that AES plant that blew up here in Tennessee, I've got a couple photos for anybody that may possibly have not seen it. It is absolutely insane, and that's what I'm trying to pull up right now. If I can find those things, let's see. I should have had them loaded in here already. I apologize. I should be able to get them pulled up here pretty quick, though. Okay, image file. Well, where did they go? I apologize, guys. I am getting that. Well, I saved the things. All right, let's see here. Let me do it this way. Amateur hour. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Okay, there's one. And let me pull up this other. Okay. So keep in mind that this was a full manufacturing facility. Nice big building, you know, just like any other. And this is after that day. Well, that is where that plant was sitting. I'm going to show you another one that's, check that out. Is that not crazy? Absolutely crazy. Let's see here. See if I can just Google some pictures of it just to see. All right. Yeah, let's have a look at some of these. All right, let's see. That's before and after. God, look at that. I think I read that there was 24,000 pounds worth of explosives in there that went off. Trying to find another real good picture. I guess that one I showed was good enough. It really, I mean, it shows. Let's see. God. Mm-mm-mm. Anyway, seems suspicious, don't it? All right. I've been on here almost an hour and a half. It is getting late. Got to start doing this earlier, and I promise one day I will. I'm going to get off here and may see you tomorrow night or maybe Monday night. Just make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click the notification bell. You will, that way you get notifications that I'm going live, and hope to see you here next time.